I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that there are a lot of you who believe this, who believe that TikTok is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, that the censorship or content moderation decisions they make are designed to manipulate young American people, young Americans into hating their government, into fighting with one another, just like we were told the Russians do. We're constantly told the Russians are trying to infiltrate social media, to turn us against each other, to create division. That was for a long time the reason more social media censorship was needed to prevent the scary Russians from dividing us. Now they've added China to it. Knowing that a lot of people aren't afraid of Russia, that the Russiagate hoax proved to be a fraud, they've now switched the fear-mongering to China. And I know there are a lot of people who oppose the war in Ukraine, the U.S. role in the war in Ukraine, who know Russiagate is a fraud, who say, no, Russia's not our enemy, but China, that's who we really have to be afraid of. Now, what happened was I actually did a lot of investigation and research into this because I wrote about it here in December of 2022 when I was still at Substack. Reflecting new U.S. control of TikTok censorship, our report criticizing Zelensky was deleted. What happened was we produced a segment on our show here that was very critical of President Zelensky and of the Ukrainian government and the war effort of the United States in Ukraine. And it went pretty viral. A lot of people were spreading it around and watching it. And then suddenly, quickly, it got banned, taken down by TikTok. That sent us a note saying, this video is a violation of our terms of service. And of course, I thought to myself, okay, I kept hearing that China censors to propagandize Americans against their government. So why would they want to delete my video critical of the U.S. government? Why would they want to protect the U.S. government from my criticism of it? Why would they want to protect the U.S. government's war effort in Ukraine by banning critiques of it? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Just like it doesn't make sense that TikTok banned mention of the bin Laden letter. And we went and investigated what actually was going on, and it turns out that what's really going on, and I'm going to show you the evidence and you can make your own decision, is that the CIA and the FBI have taken the position they want TikTok banned. The people who own TikTok, who are the founders of TikTok, the main founder in particular, is someone who was born in Singapore. He went to the London School of Economics. He then went to Harvard Business School. He's a capitalist. He's trying to get wealthy. He's getting rich. He's the founder of TikTok. And the U.S. is an incredibly lucrative market for TikTok that they don't want to lose access to because it would cost them billions of dollars in valuation in their company. They're now trying to compete with Amazon and have e-commerce on that site. It's a gold mine. And so they're desperate not to get banned from the United States. And so they've told the CIA and the FBI, look, we don't care about political censorship. We'll turn that over to you. We'll let you tell us what you want censored in order for us to stay in the United States. And that is what's been happening. The U.S. security state has been gradually commandeering the ability to content moderate on TikTok as a condition for allowing TikTok to remain in the United States. So here is the article we wrote. For years, U.S. officials and their media allies accused Russia, China, and Iran of tyranny for demanding censorship as a condition for big tech access. That's what China and Iran and Russia do. They say, hey, Google and Facebook, you can only come in our country if you agree to censor as we command. That's what Brazil is doing as well to Facebook and Google and Twitter. We'll let you be in our country, but only if you censor as we demand. And Facebook, Google, and Twitter want access to the Brazilian market. It's a huge market. And so they censor as the Brazilian government tells them to. Elon Musk had a controversy because right before the Indian election, the Indian government told Twitter, we want all these accounts banned, and Elon Musk banned them. And when he was criticized over it, he said, well, look, I'm not going to lose access to India, a gigantic democracy. Of course I'm going to censor as the government tells me to. If the threat is if I don't, I'll be banned from their market. That's what the United States is doing to TikTok. It's telling them, we're going to ban you from our country unless you censor the way we want. We know that the United States government is very interested in controlling the flow of information on big tech. That's what the Twitter files were about. They were doing that with Facebook and Google and Twitter, and of course they're doing that with TikTok as well. And so here's what we wrote, quote, concerns over China's ability to manipulate U.S. public opinion were based on claims that China was banning content on TikTok that was contrary to Beijing's interest. Western media outlets were specifically alleging that the Chinese government itself was censoring TikTok to ban any content that the CCP regarded as threatening to its national security and internal order. Rather than ban TikTok from the U.S. security state is now doing exactly that which China does to the U.S., to U.S. tech companies, namely requiring that as a condition to maintaining access to the American market, TikTok must now censor content that undermines what those agencies view, the CIA, the FBI, the DHS, as undermining American national security interests. TikTok, desperate not to lose access to hundreds of millions of Americans, has been making a series of significant concessions to appease the Pentagon, CIA, and FBI, the agencies most opposed to deals that allow TikTok to stay in the U.S. Among those concessions is that TikTok is now outsourcing what the U.S. government calls content moderation, a pleasant-sounding euphemism for political censorship, to groups controlled by the U.S. government. And this is a report from Reuters. Quote, TikTok has already unveiled several measures aimed at appeasing the U.S. government, including an agreement for Oracle Corporation to store the data of the app's users in the United States, and a United States Data Security Division, part of the U.S. government, to oversee data protection and content moderation decisions. It has spent $1.5 billion on hiring and reorganization costs to build up that unit, according to a source familiar with the matter. TikTok has been hiring away from Facebook, from Instagram, all their security state executives who had overseen censorship for Facebook and for Google, and putting them in charge of content moderation at TikTok to show the U.S. government, we're going to censor the way you want, just like Facebook and Google do, as a condition to allowing us access to your market. Keep an open mind on this. Whenever government officials start trying to scare you, and then in conjunction with it say, now that we put you in fear of China and what they're doing on TikTok, give us the power to censor what your kids can and can't hear, or what adults can and can't hear, be open-minded to what actually is happening, at least. It was the White House that first demanded TikTok be banned. It was Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, who did so in March of this year. And when she did, a TikTok user named Luke David Johnson produced a video. He's a prominent TikTok user. He's not a child. He's not a young adult. He looks to be in his 30s or 40s. He produced a video explaining why it's so dangerous to allow the Biden White House to try and ban TikTok. And I'm going to show you this video because he lays out the argument very clearly and very persuasively, and I hope it'll just at least have people keep an open mind.
Question on TikTok. Over 100 million people now use this app. What is your message to them about why you're so concerned?
The way she casually thumbs through her notebook without even looking at the pages, knowing there's nothing in there that's going to help her with probably the most important question anyone has asked her in weeks, as she tries to act like it's just some run-of-the-mill question. Oh, by the way, TikTok. You're the press secretary. You're all things media. You're obsessed with the media. TikTok has 100 million users that use it for 90 minutes a day. You know this is huge. She tries to play it down like it's practically nothing.
Said he wasn't sure if the U.S. should ban TikTok when he was asked about this. Now the administration seems to be hardening its stance. You're backing this legislation, as you mentioned. We've learned, now warning that a possible ban could be at risk here. What?
The key part of that, like it usually is, what changed? I'll tell you what changed. TikTok didn't start collecting any kind of data that it wasn't already collecting before. It's also not collecting data that a million other companies don't harvest and sell in nice, tight, neat little packages to all kinds of people around the world, which are freely available. I don't think that China went out of its way to create an app in order to track and monitor stuff that's widely available on the market already. Would have been a lot more cost effective for them to just go buy it. But what they did do was give Americans the ability to communicate with each other. And what has been happening, as she mentioned, there's 100 million users now, 90 minutes a day, using this platform to communicate with each other. That is a huge threat. And not to the Americans, not to the individuals who are communicating their ideas to one another, but to the administration in power. And that's why this is a bipartisan bill that she's so proud to keep pointing out. It's bipartisan because both parties in power agree that it's dangerous for the American people to communicate their ideas to one another without their control. See, it's fine when it's the mainstream media that they have control over. It's fine when it's Twitter and Facebook and other companies that they have control over. But it's not fine when it's a company they don't have control over. Twitter was okay before, and now Twitter's a problem because it's no longer controlled by the U.S. government. See how this works? This is probably the biggest question she's ever been asked in her career, and she has to know it. She's the press secretary of the United States of America. TikTok is a really big deal. It's way bigger than any conversation they've ever had from that podium about anything.
So, do you see what he's saying? He's saying the United States government has worked very hard to make sure it controls all important means of communication. It obviously has the U.S. media in the palm of its hands. The U.S. media reports what the CIA and the FBI tell it to and doesn't report what they tell it not to say. The big tech platforms, Facebook and Google and Twitter before Elon Musk, as we know, were subject to constant orders from the government about what to censor, and they did it. And the reason they're so fixated on Elon Musk and the reason they hate Rumble and any other site that doesn't obey them is because they can't stand the notion that Americans can go on a platform and communicate ideas that they can't stop. And this is what the threats to ban TikTok are about, is about trying to have the American government be able to commandeer those censorship decisions so that critical videos of Zelensky and the war in Ukraine or topic videos about the bin Laden letter get censored because the U.S. government wants it to, and they can easily get Google and Facebook to censor it. It's a little harder with TikTok. And TikTok has had to agree more and more because they don't care about political censorship. They care about profit. These are capitalists. They don't care about giving the U.S. government control over content moderation. They're happy to do it if that's the condition they have to meet in order to keep access to the very lucrative U.S. market. Here is TikTok constantly reassuring the United States and the U.S. government TikTok's commitment to U.S. national security. They are saying here that their commitment is to U.S. national security. Put simply, Project Texas, which is the TikTok project to hand over control of data and content moderation to American agencies and companies, is an unprecedented initiative dedicated to making every American on TikTok feel safe with confidence their data is secure and the platform is free from outside influence. This is the thing about this idea that the Chinese are spying on us with TikTok. As Luke Johnson said, leaving aside how much Facebook and Google spy on us, how much data they have about you and me and everybody, we covered before about how the CIA and the FBI buy on the open market enormous amounts of data about Americans that are for sale, that have been bundled, that they would be prohibited constitutionally from collecting on their own, but they buy it commercially instead. And if the goal of the Chinese government was to spy on Americans and gather data about Americans, it would be much more cost effective to just go buy it on the open market rather than having to create this whole entire app and attract Americans to use it. But the condition for TikTok to remain in America has been to hand over control of content moderation decisions and data to the U.S. government, and that's exactly what they're doing. Here's more from TikTok. Our content moderation systems and processes, both machine and human, will always be subject to outside review to ensure that moderation is taking place only in accordance with our published community guidelines. The USDS will implement these rules And the TTP, American-based trusted technology provider, will have full visibility, guaranteeing that there are no expected changes to our system. So all promotional decisions will be as transparent and audible to the third-party monitors and U.S. Content Advisory Council. Here is Bloomberg, or rather Reuters, in June of 2023. I'm sorry, yeah, it was Bloomberg in May of 2023. TikTok will soon grant Oracle full access to their code and algorithm. TikTok will soon grant Oracle Corporation full access to its source code, algorithm, and content moderation material as part of efforts to alleviate national security concerns about the app. Here from Reuters, TikTok moves U.S. users' data to Oracle servers. TikTok had previously been storing its U.S. user data at its own data centers in Virginia with a backup in Singapore. It will now delete private data on U.S. users from its own data centers and rely fully on Oracle's U.S. servers, it said. TikTok has also set up a dedicated U.S. data security team known as USDS as a gatekeeper for U.S. user information and ring fencing it from ByteDance, a company spokesman told Reuters. Now, I understand that if you are just somebody who thinks China is the only threat, the biggest threat, even bigger than Hamas, and everything connected to China, where the China is mentioned, you get very scared and you're ready to give the government all power. I know this all seems with TikTok saying, oh, they're going to hand over content moderation decisions to the U.S. security state. Oh, I don't believe China. China will say anything to get access to us. But again, there's 100 million Americans, 100 million Americans, one out of every three Americans that use this app voluntarily. And the proof that TikTok is actually making decisions to censor in accordance with what the U.S. government wants is very clear. We just showed you some. Dave Smith, who I think is one of the smartest commentators around, went on Joe Rogan's program last week to talk about the Israel-Gaza war, and he brought up the controversy with the bin Laden letter. And watch this, what happened here.
In the same way, you know, like the other week that Osama bin Laden's letter to America went like super viral on TikTok, and then they scrubbed it off of The Guardian as a response to it, which is just, number one, like, what is that? Doesn't that just say everything about our society? Is that's the response? To scrub it off The Guardian? Take it down so people can't see it.
The Guardian being the newspaper covered it?
Yeah, they had published it, and it had been up there, I think, since...
And what were they? They were concerned that it was encouraging people to support it.
Yeah, like a bunch of TikTokers, like young lefty TikTokers, started like making these videos where they're like, Osama bin Laden was right about everything, and then they were getting heat for it, so they just took it down. I mean, you can still find it like on the archives and stuff.
But still, a lot of people's videos are still up, right? There's a lot.
I don't know about that. I'm not on TikTok. I kind of just saw on Twitter when people were sharing the TikTok videos, so I don't know if they were taking them down. I know TikTok takes down stuff pretty quickly. But I don't know. I don't know what they were doing with that.
Why would they take that down though? If I was a Chinese-run propaganda corporation, TikTok removes hashtag for Osama bin Laden's letter to America after viral videos circulate. So it did just remove the hashtag. The Guardian also pulled the text of the Al-Qaeda founder.
Do you see what just happened there? Joe Rogan had been hearing and got convinced that TikTok is this propaganda weapon of the Chinese Communist Party. They use it to disseminate information that corrupts Americans. And he's like, why would TikTok possibly ever ban the Osama bin Laden letter from being discussed? They must love the Osama bin Laden letter. It turns Americans against each other. They would never ban it. And then suddenly appears on the screen a news story that says TikTok banned the hashtag to the bin Laden letter, which prevents people from seeing it. And Joe Rogan said, oh, I guess they did. And then he tried to kind of minimize it and say, oh, they only banned the hashtag. Banning the hashtag is a huge deal because that's how people search for it, and then they can't find it. But they went much further than that, TikTok did. But you see, Joe Rogan in his mind has been told so many times or absorbed, oh, there's a Chinese Communist Party site. They're not going to ban the bin Laden letter. They would spread that. They would love that. But they did ban it. Because the minute the U.S. government tells TikTok, we don't like what you're allowing on the site, TikTok bans it as a condition to staying in the United States. And the United States security state is gaining more and more control over what appears on TikTok and what doesn't. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.